Cult of personality.
Welcome back to the line. Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, filling in for Andrew McLean. Words are hard today. On Talk 99.5. And I think I want to outline the fact that we're on Talk 99.5 about to have the conversation that we're going to have. Talk 99.5 is the biggest news talk station in the state of Alabama. It's a 100,000 watt blowtorch that covers massive swaths of the state. It's the most listened to news talk station in the state of Alabama. And this is a message that I think needs to be heard in Alabama. And what originally brought Dee and I together initially was the work that she does with Chad O. Jackson at Historia Revelata. And the MLK project was about to be released. We got connected and just thought it'd be a really unique thing to be able to share his message and the work that he's doing with our audience. And that podcast exploded and got like 200,000 views on Facebook alone. The reels that we produced on that went crazy, but he's got his own social media presence that far exceeds that. And it's a message that is, I actually thought I was going to get way more blowback for publishing it. It was nothing but like people not congratulating, but like, saying, hey, good job. That took a lot of courage to publish that. I can't imagine the amount of courage that Chad and Dee must have to be able to do it. So talk about, um, Historia Revelata and your work on the Martin Luther King or MLK project. Excuse me.
Sure. Well, so I first wanted to say that I came into the project really late in the game, right? Like Chad has been working on this independently for the better part of a year, actually a little over a year. And he, I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with Chad, but he got his start. In addition to, like you said, he runs a very successful plumbing business, but because he's very big on independent business ownership, and but he also is a historian and a documentarian. And so how he originally got started was through a film called Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom was wildly successful. And that was basically the story of the Black conservative. And he did not produce or direct that film. He was kind of the main focal point of the film. And then a second film came as a result of that, the sequel, which was called Uncle Tom 2. And Chad was very much hands-on in the direction and production of that project. And then from there, he has been doing the MLK project, which is his first solely independent documentary film. And because he's got so many hours of research done on this and footage, and you've seen it, Brian, and you know, like sort of the level of just extraordinary research that's been done for this project. I've never seen anything like it, quite frankly, and I've never seen a lot of the archived footage that he's been able to procure for it. And so he because he was in the sort of the thick of it as it relates to a lot of content, and you can't ask an audience to sit through a 5 or 6 hour film. So we made the decision when he brought me into the project, which was not until last summer. We made the decision to make it a docuseries and to give it to people in bite-sized chunks. So Historia Revelata is 100% Chad's creation. It's his foundation. It's his production company. And he has invited me in to be a part of what he already started, very much started himself. So I'm kind of like I've kind of swung in, and I do have some film experience. I've done not production work, certainly not, but I have done a lot of public relations work for feature films and for independent films. So I kind of come to the table with, more than anything, just writing experience. I've written everything from, fiction work to corporate work to creative work to, things like screenplays, et cetera. So I do have a little bit of experience in this area, and Chad's really good at sort of getting the right juice from every squeeze as it relates to the people that he works with, and so he has saw fit to include me in this project, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. It's as a woman who made history as the first Black gymnast at the University of Alabama, this and the stepdaughter of someone who marched with King. This one hits really, really close to home for me because of course, I grew up hearing everything wonderful about Martin Luther King and everything, about how important and critical he was. And it was a big, that conversation came up when I was making my decision to go to Alabama. And it wasn't pressure and it wasn't coercion, but it was certainly mentioned in terms of, the whole Governor Wallace thing at Foster Auditorium. Foster was my last name. These things came up when I was making my decision about where to go to school. And so I come by it honestly in terms of my dedication to wanting to unearth the truth about this and to really support Chad in his telling of the truth about this. I do come by it honestly. And this project is not like anything that I have ever seen. It's certainly not like anything I've ever worked on. And it is an absolute juggernaut of a research project. And, Chad has encountered a lot of support, to your point about the people when you all, aired his episode on the podcast that he did with you, you mostly received positive feedback.
Yep.
That's really been the case as well with this MLK project. And I really attribute it to the fact that I think people are tired of being lied to, period. I think 2020 was kind of the tipping point for everybody. And I know it was for me. And so the things that we were just kind of comfortably numb about and were, content to be blissfully ignorant about, we're no longer in that space. Nobody has that energy anymore. We were lied to on a level that was literally life-threatening, right? And during 2020.
Yeah.
And I think since then, we have kept that same energy. We have not let up. Nobody's above reproach, and everybody gets held accountable, whether it's, someone we did vote for, someone we didn't vote for, or even, a historical sacred cow. It doesn't matter. Everybody is getting vetted through the same filter. And for me and for Chad, that filter is the Holy Spirit. And in Chad's case, he is absolutely a man of God. And the underpinning for everything he does is it's not about, sort of shining a light on the ills of a human being. It's not about exposing sin. It's not about exposure at all. It's about, correcting narratives that have been told, that have been falsely told, and not just told, but coercively suggested to people that they adopt as the only narrative there is to have about a subject.
Yeah.
Chad rails against that. And it's not that he's a contrarian for contrarian's sake, for contrary's sake. He is a truth teller, and he understands that he has gotten really an assignment to not about Martin Luther King, but just about truth in general. And so he, using the gifts that God has given him, he is an excellent researcher. He is an excellent filmmaker. He is self-taught, which is crazy to me. And he is also about paying all of that knowledge forward to the next generation of people who want to be documentarians. So that, these are God-given gifts, and Chad knows that it's his responsibility to steward them well.
Yep.
In stewarding them well, that comes with maybe, broaching topics that make people uncomfortable, broaching topics that have had long-standing narratives with backstories that most people are not aware of. Most people don't know the things that he talks about in this documentary about MLK. Most people don't know them. I knew some of it, definitely not all, because I had started my own deep dive on King, right, before I met Chad. But I'm telling you that, the real motive for this and the real purpose of this is for him to, one, give God glory through his stewarding of his gifts, and two, to give people, to empower other people with the ability to take back their right to think freely, to take back their right to think discerningly, to take back their right to, ask questions that need to be asked, even if it's about what the world considers a sacred cow. That we don't worship human beings, we worship Jesus. And not that he's not a human being, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We don't have the fear of man, and Chad doesn't have the fear of man. So that alone is kind of the fuel that drives him. It's what drives his work, and it's definitely what has driven his. Some people would say courage to tackle this particular topic.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And you want to talk about a sacred cow and at what level? There's not a city in the United States that doesn't have a Martin Luther King Boulevard, a Martin Luther King
Yep.
Bridge, a Martin Luther King something,
A
right?
drive. Yeah.
Yeah, every single city, every
Yep.
single kid in public school is taught this narrative, and it's religious dogma, and it's
Yes.
lies. It's lies, 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 and that is what
Propaganda.
is so
Yeah.
crazy, is that it's the level of lying mixed with the level of sacred cow, right? That it is a religious
Mm-hmm.
dogma, and then it's all
Yeah.
lies. And it's like, well, what have they been able to get over on us by making this such a religious dogma and lying so hard? And I forget exactly what the three things. I usually have this at the tip of my tongue when I'm talking about Chad, but what they were able to accomplish through King was to essentially usher in Marxism into the mainstream, to subvert the
Correct.
Christian church, and then there was one other thing that he says that they were able to accomplish through him, but
Social justice.
social justice, yes, and
Yeah.
bringing this in, and it's complete and usher in civil rights, right? And then you talk about the idea of civil rights. Well, and people think, well, yeah, I mean, black people voting or whatever. It's like, yeah, but there's way more that happened with civil rights, and what has the legacy of it been? He looks into that and shows it's like, look, he would argue that, and I assume you would too, that blacks were better off pre-Civil War than they are post.
Yep. 100%. And certainly, well, I'll say that with this caveat. I'll say even post Civil War, blacks were absolutely on a trajectory of, not forced integration, but rightful assimilation,
Yeah.
right? Assimilating at the free association and free assimilation.
Yep.
So, that of free association is a God-given right. And really what King did, and this is really kind of this again is the underpinning for Chad's purpose and work with this project, is that the first thing that everyone says and calls King is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He was, really posing as being clerical, right? He was posing as clergy. He was posing as a pastor. He was posing as his doctorate degree was completely fraudulent and plagiarized. Everything that he submitted to get his doctorate degree was plagiarized. All of his speeches were written by somebody named Stanley Levison, either Stanley Levison or Bayard Rustin, and these were two comrades. Right, I'm using that word on purpose.
Marxist,
These are
yep.
two comrades in the communist movement, and King. The biggest reason, though, that Chad, said I gotta tell the truth about this, and I'm paraphrasing him, and I hope he forgives like the direct quoting, but it really is about the fact that this man was bastardizing the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yep.
He was not. He may have been a pastor by the world's definition of pastor and by official, anointing through the church, quote unquote. I'm saying that in air quotes. But he was absolutely not a servant of Jesus Christ. He was not a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was a minister of the gospel of social justice. And he did not believe in the virgin birth. He renounced it. He did not believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and he did not believe in the second coming of Christ. These are the foundational principles of Christianity,
Yeah.
and he aborted all of them, and publicly did it, starting at age 12. So this is a person who not only was an apostate but a heretic.
Yeah.
And these are the things, and not forget about it, but, aside from all of his sort of fleshly human foibles, right, this is what he honestly believed.
Yeah.
He did not have a picture of, he didn't have anything resembling Christianity over his dining room table wall. He had a picture of Gandhi.
Yeah.
These are the things that, and he is on the record saying that um, all religions need to be respected. And I have a whole opinion about that because there is
Yes.
not one scripture that says that. In fact, every scripture says the exact opposite of
Yeah,
that.
I've been
The
on a
way, the
big
truth, and life.
freedom of religion is insanity earlier today on immigration. Well, D, we're up. We're out of time. Real quick, where can people find your work, Chad's work, all the work?
I'm going to point everybody to chadojackson.com. That's where people, if they want to, we're still in the middle of season 2 of the MLK project. Season 1 is completely wrapped. We wrapped that last December. However, it is still available on demand to watch. And we also are having weekly Q&A sessions with Patreon members who subscribe to the director access package. So if everybody goes to chadojackson.com and just scroll to the sort of the center of the homepage, you'll see where they can subscribe to Patreon and actually be able to communicate with Chad directly on a weekly basis.
And I am one of those subscribers and would encourage everyone listening to be as well. So, D, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
All right. That'll bring us to another break. Talk 99.5. This is The Line. We'll be back. We're back to the line. I'm Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, and I always say in my podcast, I'm usually talking to a microphone and host of this here podcast. Well, this isn't a podcast. This is a radio show that I'm filling in for Andrew McLean. This is the first time I've filled in for Andrew. I've filled in for Leland many a time. Filled in a couple times for Richard and Val, Dixon and Vining in the mornings, but I do believe, indubitably do believe, that this is my first fill in for Andrew. He's become a good friend and really appreciate him having me guest host here. So we've got a few minutes to fill, and then I'm going to have my buddy Stan McDonald will be joining me at the bottom of the hour to talk about some uh, retarded takes that a state legislator down in Lower Alabama had, and insulting the great Guy Hunt. And Stan McDonald and Guy Hunt go way back, so we're going to be hearing his thoughts on those terrible takes by that legislator. And he had many other stupid things to say as well that we'll discuss. Stan and I will drag him through the mud. It'll be a glorious time. But one of the things that's brought me and Andrew McLean together as of recent has been the Turning Point USA tour that I've been on. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I'll probably talk more about it in the last 30 minutes of the show as well. But Turning Point is doing the Pick Up the Mic initiative, which is basically picking up Charlie's mic. Someone has to do it, and they go state by state and they find people that can either do speaking engagements, which there's a lot of people that you can get to do speaking engagements, but finding someone to do a Prove Me Wrong, there's very few people who can sit in a tent on a college campus and be able to debate history, politics, church history, theology, and do that without freaking out on the students, and also, do it in a way that's jovial and have a sense of humor when you're doing it. And it's hard. It's not easy to be able to do that. And Charlie did it better than anyone. And so Turning Point has grabbed me in the state of Alabama to put me on tour doing speaking engagements. I'll be at Troy University tomorrow. I was at the University of West Alabama last week. The week before, I was at the University of North Alabama, even spoken at some high schools doing speaking engagements. But the Prove Me Wrongs, which is the debate under the tent during the day while the students are on campus, I've done Montevallo by myself, and then, as I mentioned, Representative Ernie Yarborough and I were at the University of North Alabama, or excuse me, University of Alabama at Huntsville, excuse me, in North Alabama, doing that. But the Montevallo one was pretty intense, man. And Andrew had me come on to talk about, the lead up to that. So we scheduled, I think it was like March 5th or something, that I was supposed to, um, maybe it was February, I can't remember. There was an initial scheduling for me to be on campus at Montevallo doing this Prove Me Wrong, and then we published it, publicized it. We promoted that event, and all kinds of people jumped on the 1819 News Facebook. Brian Dawson needs the Charlie Kirk treatment. Death threats, blah blah blah, Discord chatter, same type of thing. Bunch of crazy threats. And then the students at the University of Montevallo protested me, and they used my whole name, Kenneth Brian Dawson. They were so mad at me, they used my first name like they were my parent or something. My whole name, Kenneth Brian Dawson. They criticized my criminal background that I've talked about at length and have shared my testimony on this microphone multiple times. And then also what happened with Bubba Copeland always gets the left riled up. And so they staged a protest, and they did a student walkout at the University of Montevallo to walk out and protest Brian Dawson being the speaker. And so, anyway, um, it's been a lot of fun, and we've pushed back against all of the protesting and death threats and everything else, and we've just gone and done it. And I'll talk more about that after me and Stan have our round. So we'll be back. All right, we're back. This is The Line. I am Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, filling in for Andrew McLean on this glorious Monday. Hopefully, I've made your Monday a little more exciting. Certainly, there's some of you that I pissed off, but I think most everybody who listens to Talk 99.5 was probably entertained, engaged, informed, educated, but most of all, soothed by my beautiful voice. Um, Speaking of beautiful voices, I've got the illustrious chairman of 1819 News on the line, and he wants to. So this guy, Stan McDonald, is he's been around the Alabama political scene forever. He's also a conservative Christian who homeschooled his parents, and he was doing that when it wasn't cool. His resume goes far and wide. It's like Santa Claus's Christmas list that he rolls out is all the cool things that Stan has done. He's also the head of Jacob Title, so if you need real estate work, done up there in the legal realm, give Stan a call. But bringing Stan McDonald on to talk about some unfortunate remarks that were made by Representative Chris Pringle. I call his remarks retarded. I know you're not supposed to say that. You're also not supposed to call things gay, and I would say his remarks were gay and retarded. That's how much I dislike them. He invoked the name of Guy Hunt and insulted him. Stan, talk about why that insults you, and then how bizarre the remarks were and how off base they were.
Yeah, hey Brian, give me this opportunity. First, I love Guy Hunt, and I come by it honestly. Many of you may not know, listeners, that he was the first Republican governor in Alabama, and what a great governor he was. And so many of us in the conservative movement who have been fortunate enough to be elected or given responsible positions in this state can thank our pioneer, visionary, courageous Guy Hunt. Truly, that's the case, including Chris Pringle. I have no ill will towards Chris Pringle. I'm going to talk about some things that I hope that I really believe and trust. Even mean some of these things, hopefully. But I remember Chris Pringle. He was he was either a college Republican or a young Republican during my years serving with Guy Hunt. I know we showed him lots of courtesies. He was building not just a name for himself, but he was building the party back then. So no ill will towards Chris. But oh my goodness, when I heard the comments, I can't help but defend the legacy and our good heritage. Now, in full disclosure, our Republican heritage and the role that Guy Hunt played in full disclosure, Guy Hunt was better to me than any man probably on this earth other than my dad himself. When he was elected in the fall of '86, I wasn't involved in his campaign. I was a young farmer picking cotton, literally on a cotton picker, listening to that campaign unfold. And Guy Hunt gave me an opportunity because he heard I was a big Republican activist farmer up in North Alabama. And I became a deputy chief of staff for him in my 20s and his youngest cabinet member, eventually as commissioner of revenue. And I had heard that Guy Hunt only graduated high school. I'd heard that he didn't go to college. Did you know that Guy Hunt, and I guess this is some of the stuff that Chris Pringle was trying to exploit or take advantage of, but that man was a small farmer. He was a part-time preacher. He was elected 12 or 16, I think it's 12 years, as Republican probate judge in Coleman County at a time when you just couldn't do that. By the way, when you're local, people vote for you. That really tells you something. And so the Democrats during that campaign of '86 made him out to be, a hayseed redneck. And Chris Pringle, unfortunately, it pains me to even say this, said that he was illiterate, or he said that Sonny Callahan said he was illiterate, said he didn't know how to use a knife and fork. If I was going to try my best to try to insult somebody, I don't know if I could come up with something more insulting than that if I tried.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is not about bashing Chris, but here's what bothers me, Brian. I know how I feel about closed primary bill. I think I know how you feel about it. I would say it's a respectable debate. If we're going to have a respectable debate, let's do that. But let's not borrow the rhetoric of the bad Democrats. Let's not argue like them. They are the ones who told all those treacherous, slanderous lies about Guy Hunt in the 80s and 90s. All those things that I just said that it pains me to repeat. those things are what bad Democrats were saying. They were not true. They were not well intended. They were very hurtful. And the opposite is so true. And it scares me when our Republican friends put on this prideful, arrogant mentality of a sort of a Chamber of Commerce sort of arrogance, which really finds itself at odds with the standard-bearing, God-fearing leader that Guy Hunt was. This man, a lot of us have anything and everything we can do in this party to trace back to what Guy Hunt did. The man stood like a stone wall at a time in Alabama when you couldn't be a Republican. And do you think that he took some bullets? That man took bullets, and it hurt him till the day that he died. And, you know, I know a lot of people don't know the history of Guy Hunt, but let me just say they prosecuted him successfully in the middle of his second term. Now, thankfully, there were some senators back then who made it a point while Guy was still living to get him pardoned, rightfully so. But Guy Hunt was, I could really speak an hour about this, but he was we're mocking, or not we, but anyone who wants to mock Guy Hunt and who he was and what he was and how he got where he did, this man organically, by his character qualities, ascended to governor of the state of Alabama. What a historical feat it was. And anybody who wants to mock that man, that is one of the greatest ways to self-identify yourself as a spiritual Democrat. Brian, that's one of the best ways to identify yourself as a spiritual Democrat. If you want to mock Guy Hunt on his education or on his otherwise how he got where he got, Guy used to say, I always called him governor then. I say Guy now because, Lord, he's a friend. He's a kindred spirit. Of course, he was my elder. I respected him. But he used to say some people are educated far beyond their level of intelligence. That's worth repeating. Mm-hmm. Some people are educated far past their level of intelligence. Guy Hunt was such a hayseed redneck. I'm being sarcastic when I say that, of course. But that's what they'd like to say. All these people, I live in Huntsville, all these people from Virginia and Missouri, all over the country, moving to Alabama, you know, we're supposed to be the hayseed rednecks down here. But guess what? It's work ethic, fearing the Lord, honoring family, going to church that gives us the kind of environment up here why everybody wants to come here, Brian.
Yeah.
And Guy Hunt had all those things. That's why he got elected. And, you know, let me tell you how backwoods Guy Hunt was. When he was working on that peach farm, when he was an Amway dealer, okay, they mocked that. They mocked the fact that he used to sell eggs, walking up and down the neighborhood selling eggs. The Democrats did a commercial about him one time carrying an Amway box through a neighborhood. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Hey, I had 7 kids. Me and my wife had 7 kids in about 9 years. Did you know I tried to sell Amway too? Here I am, some self-respected lawyer now. But buddy, you try to sell Amway when you got young kids. I tried other multi-level marketing jobs besides Amway. I wasn't any good at it, but guess what Guy Hunt was? He was a part-time farmer because he believed in things. But let me tell you what a redneck he was. By the way, redneck's a whole different subject. I'm a redneck, you're a redneck, because what it means is you're a covenant-keeping Protestant, true and blue is what it really means. But do your history on that. Google it, listeners. But he's the first guy in Alabama who found Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan found him. The night Guy Hunt was elected in November 1986, Ronald Reagan, the Gipper himself, from the White House called and was utterly ecstatic about his kindred spirit, good friend, Guy Hunt. Guy Hunt's the first person who ever invited Ronald Reagan to Alabama in 1975 when it was cool with the chamber crowd to be for Gerald Ford, because he, after all, was the incumbent. But Guy Hunt, once again, the pioneer, once again, the guy who has good organic political policy common sense, invites this former governor of California, fills up the gymnasium at Coleman High School because when Guy Hunt said it, local people believed it. filled that gymnasium up that night, and they had been kindred spirits ever since. God bless the days of Guy Hunt. God bless his numbers and his legacy. What that man went through for all of us is historical. And I really, as much as, and I hope I stress this now, I know Chris, I'm fond of Chris. I don't think Chris meant to identify with what I'm saying. Chris will probably hear this. I have supported Chris, still love Chris, okay? But that I do wonder why he gratuitously picked up the name of Guy Hunt in the middle of this debate and said some things that were utterly, patently, unprovably, terribly false.
Mm.
I mean, to say that we sent him off to Georgia for 6 weeks to hide him from the public, my God. I mean, the Democrats didn't do that well in terms of their slander and saying stuff like that during the election. You can call time on me if you want to, Brian. I know I'm
This is
railing
great.
on and on, but I cannot help. You know how Martin Luther said, I can do no other?
Yeah, here I stand. I
Bro,
can do no other.
if they talk about Guy Hunt, I can do no other. We need to take a little time, a moment of silence, and thank Guy Hunt and his character qualities. And I hate to see people attacked for so-called being hayseed redneck, but what they really are is they're taking the narrow path to heaven. They're not on the wide road. They're not on the wide highway, bro. We can always do that. That's easy.
Yeah. Well, Stan, this is great. Thank you for your heartfelt praise and remembrance of Guy Hunt in the face of a little bit of probably not well thought out slander. Maybe slander is not the right word, but you understand what I'm saying. Stan McDonald, thank you so much for taking the time to call in.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, brother. All right, guys, we're up on another break. We will be back on the other side. This is Talk 99.5, The Line. Brian Dawson, 1819 News, filling in for Andrew McLean. We're back. The Line, Talk 99.5. I'm Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, filling in through to the words that aren't coming out of my mouth correctly for Andrew McLean. Got a few minutes left to the end of the show, and I just want to go into something. It's a piece from a sermon that I wrote for the Trinity Conference at Trinity Presbyterian Church, down off of 119 and 280. Had a pretty gangster conference that had some really good, hard hitting political preaching. If you're into, good historic reform theology that applies, you know, uh, the word of God to politics and culture, where it belongs, as well as every other sphere of life, you should check out Trinity Presbyterian Church on 119 and 280. But I preach there, and it ties into the Turning Point thing. And so, walking into the Turning Point USA thing after the death threats and everything that came in, after the student protests, after all of this resistance, the event gets canceled, it gets rescheduled, and I go there. In order for me to be able to go debate students on campus, there was 40 law enforcement officers with snipers and all kinds of other stuff going on, just so that I could go and sit down for 2 hours and debate students and apply the word of God to politics and culture with the next generation, the hearts, minds, and souls of the future and coming generation. And, why would I put myself in that position? Because if we're going to win, that's what it takes. You do whatever it takes, come what may, right? And so courage is the great need of the hour. Telling the truth in a world of lies is dangerous business. It requires courage. There's something incredibly powerful about speaking, especially speaking the truth where it isn't welcome. How did God create everything from nothing? How did he bring everything into existence? Bible scholars, theologians, or people who just been to Sunday school once or twice know that God brought everything into existence by speaking. He spoke it. Out of nothing came everything by God speaking it into existence. We are the only creatures in all of creation who have the ability to speak. We are created in his image, and we share with him the power to speak. And because of that, we should not take speech lightly. We are created in his image, and so we share with him the ability to speak. So take speaking seriously. So, why did Jesus come to the earth? There are many good answers that involve redeeming sinful man and laying his life down for his bride, the church. But the answer he gave to Pontius Pilate in John 18:37 was this. Jesus said, "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth." So think about that. God spoke everything into existence. He spoke, and his son came into the world to bear witness to the truth. Therefore, speaking the truth is a divine act. As his image bearers, we not only have the divine right to speak the truth, we have the divine responsibility to speak the truth. So please hear what I'm saying. God's people have a responsibility to speak the truth. This is not an option. And this is a hill we must be willing to die on. And so, Brian, you're on a conservative news talk station. Why are you talking about Jesus? Well, the reason that Charlie was so impactful, the reason that Charlie Kirk is a Christian martyr, the reason that he's brought us closer to revival than anything that's happened in my lifetime, if not the last few hundred years, is because Charlie, there was no difference between his politics and his faith. He would be, shortly before he was shot, he shared the gospel in its entirety with all of those students there. He shared the gospel and moments later was shot. And he was there to talk about politics, but he shared the gospel. Why? Because the two are connected. Okay. Your faith should be informing your politics. That's how it's supposed to work. This idea of separation in church, separation of church and state, the way we understand it is wrong. The church and the state are separate, yes, but Christ is Lord over the church and Christ is Lord over the state. You don't separate state from Christian morality. You separate it from the church. The church shouldn't be governing the state, and the state shouldn't be governing the church. The state shouldn't be saying you need to close your church and get a vaccine, and you can't do communion because you might get germs during COVID, okay? So, yes, there's a separation, but you can't separate state from morality. It's not whether a state or a nation will have a morality that governs it. It's which morality, which God, right? And so the Christian God, the God of the Bible and his son, Jesus Christ, is who Western nations have always been attached to. So when we go out and we talk about our politics, faith should be there. And when we talk about faith, you should end up in the political and cultural spheres. You can't separate them. And this is why Charlie was so great, because that's what he did day in, day out. He'd be on college campuses, and one stream of consciousness as he was talking, he would be talking about some political issue that was facing them, and he would go from there and he would dive into church history and he would bring it back to the scriptures and theology, and then he would apply that back to um, the political situation that was going on. There was no separating the two. It's interwoven, and that's the way that it should be. I don't know. I can't talk about politics without talking about my faith. I can't talk about faith without soon finding myself talking about politics because the scriptures talk about things that are heavily political. It teaches us how to live. And if we live the way the scriptures say, we would be in harmony with the way that God created things, which is how Western civilization got here, okay, was by living in harmony with the way that God created things. And what's happened now with communism and Marxism is it's uprooted and flipped that. And we're essentially living in complete disunity and disharmony with the way that the creator created everything. And that's why we're seeing utter chaos, is because we're living in rebellion against the creator rather than in submission and harmony. And so that's my message to you. I call it Christ or chaos. That's what I've been talking about on these university campuses, is Christ or chaos. Okay, we will either have Christ and submit to Him and do things His way and flourish, or we will reject Him and we will experience the chaos that we're experiencing now in our civilization. There's no other way. Okay, and so also 1819 news .com. You can go there. That's our website. Subscribe to the newsletter. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on all the socials. Make sure you're up to date on all the things that are going on in the state of Alabama. We focus on statewide. We're a statewide, state focused news and multimedia company. That is what we're focused on. This state, our city councils, our county commissions, our state legislature, our universities. And we do incredible work holding the powerful to account, and encouraging good things in the state. But yeah, go there, subscribe to the newsletter. If you're a person of means and wealth and you like the message that we're spreading and promoting, reach out to us. We're a 501c3 not for profit, and we take donations. We run on donations from the people of Alabama. So please support our work. Reach out, and thank you for spending the last 4 hours with me. I don't know when Andrew's coming back, but I'm not coming back tomorrow. I wish I could, but that'll wrap it up. This is The Line, Talk 99.5, Brian Dawson. I'll talk to you guys later.